Welcome to Leadership Where It Matters Most. The family is the most important institution in the world. The future of the church passes through the family. The church has the greatest mission of any organization ever. Go and make disciples of all nations. The family and the church. This is where leadership matters most. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Leadership Where It Matters Most. Today's guest is Dr. Ryan Topping. Dr. Topping got an MA in philosophy from the University of Manitoba, and he earned a doctorate in theology from the University of Oxford. He has held several academic posts, and until 2024, he was a full professor of theology and director of the Benedict XVI Institute for the New Evangelization at Newman Theological College in Edmonton, Alberta, where he also served previously as the academic dean. Dr. Topping has published 10 books and numerous articles on Catholic education and culture. He's a popular speaker at conferences. Today in our conversation, it was a very riveting conversation for me. I have a lot of respect for Dr. Topping and all of his work. We began just with, sharing a little bit of his story, his journey, especially for listeners who aren't maybe as familiar with Dr. Topping as they could be. And then we got into some of his work and insights around Catholic education and family, both of which, he has produced volumes of written and spoken word on. We talk a little bit more at length about Catholic education, sort of the defining principles and where Catholic education needs to go and that kind of thing. We talk a little bit about the study that he conducted sort of on seminarians and new priests, sort of the state of seminarians and new priests and vocations in general here in Canada. It's a wonderful little study that he conducted. The summary and the insights that he gained is in this wonderful booklet called Meet Our New Priests. So we talk a little bit about that. And then we spent a lot of time talking about his new initiative, his new project, which is called Gregory the Great Institute. We go over kind of what his real vision is, what he's trying to accomplish, the immediate conferences that they have planned, and the areas of focus that they're going to do. So Dr. Topping is a bit of an entrepreneur. He's an academic, super bright, very devoted, husband, father, and disciple of Jesus Christ. So this is a great episode, and I know you're going to enjoy it. Dr. Ryan Topping, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a real joy.
It is a joy for me as well. I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have. And for listeners who maybe don't know as much about Dr. Ryan Topping as they should, I thought we'd just have you take a few minutes, tell us about your upbringing, tell us about your faith journey, about your studies, anything that you want to share with the audience to give them a sense of who you are and where you come from.
All right. Thank you. Well, I'm, as I say, delighted to be with you, Brett. Thank you for your work that you do. You do a lot of different things, including this little apostolate through your communications media. Myself, yes, I'm a husband and father. My wife and I have been married for 25 years this August, in fact, which is kind of fun. And we have 10 children. Our eldest is 19. He's been a seminarian for 3 years, or he's in his third year as a seminarian at St. Joseph's Seminary here in Edmonton, Alberta. And our youngest is 4. And out of that lot, we have one little girl and the rest are boys. So there's a lot of blood, guts, and tears that go on in our family. But it's all fun. So that's our family. I've been a professor for about for 20 years. I had a teaching career. This last year, I tacked and have now really taken on. It's been a real privilege to help launch a new institute, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So that's my background. I grew up as a good Protestant, as a Mennonite, kind of in a mixed home with one side Mennonite, the other side filled with Orangemen, atheists, who are quite anti-Catholic. My wife and I met in Winnipeg at a small Mennonite university called Canadian Mennonite University. It wasn't called that then, but that's what it is now. And at one point we helped start an intentional community, which is something that Mennonites are actually pretty good at. So we did that in our younger years for a little while. And I had studied philosophy, and that was kind of a Achilles heel in that it opened me up to great tradition. So eventually I was studying to be a pastor, but we in the midst of that, we went to Oxford and to continue doctoral studies, and that's where we became Catholic.
Wow. Now, we have one connection in the city of Saskatoon. So where does Saskatoon line up in your story?
Well, Saskatoon is where I was born and raised, very proudly, happily. So I lived there until I think I left home at 17, and my home church was called Mennonite, Forest Grove Mennonite Brethren. It's a kind of a small mega church. Lots of happy life there, and I also spent time farming with one of my uncles in southern Saskatchewan for many summers. So, and as a family, we've had a chance to live there. Well, let me think. At least twice. Yes. So after Oxford, we came back for a postdoc, which I held at St. Thomas More College on the University of Saskatchewan campus. So we go back regularly because most of my family's there.
What years did you teach at STM?
I was at STM. I'd have to think about that. 2004. I think it was 2000. Yes, 2008 to 2010. It was a 2-year postdoc. So mostly I was actually writing. I did a little bit of teaching, but mostly it was writing and speaking, that kind of thing.
There you go. And Evan Hardy Collegiate graduate, is that right? Do I remember that correctly or not?
All the way. Boy, you dig deep. Yeah, that's it. Evan Hardy, played football. Had a lot of fun there. Where did you go?
I was at Holy Cross. Yeah.
Oh, we were always trying to beat you, but couldn't.
Yes, that's right.
The big sporting events. Well, we're about the same age. Maybe we met each other in the field.
I graduated in 1988 from Holy Cross.
Okay, you were a little bit ahead of me.
Yeah, yes. I get a few years.
I would have just seen the tail end of your glory.
Well, it was a small tail. Anyways, thank you for sharing that. It's neat. Gord Dowdy refers to Saskatoon as the Parish of the Prairies. And in many ways, it still is home for me, even though I've been away since 1998. So that's a neat connection. So Dr. Topping, we're certainly going to talk about the Institute. I'm really excited, even just to discuss it with you as kind of its founder and executive director. But I wanted to just begin with a couple other themes that you have spoken into quite a bit. You've written a lot. And the two areas would be family and in Catholic education. Mm-hmm. And, as an academic, you could focus on a lot of different areas. Mm-hmm. Why family and why Catholic education?
Good question. Well, my doctorate was on St. Augustine in moral theology. Really, from my own point of view, I went into studies naive, rather foolhardy. I had no sense of how to make money as a man. I just thought this would all be taken care of in Providence, and in many ways it has. But my own interest in study since being a young man really has been to understand what is the nature of God and what is the best life possible. So education becomes a natural a natural topic. So my doctorate was on St. Augustine's view of education, and what he did for the history of the West is essentially he looked the classical inheritance, starting with Plato, Aristotle, and so on. And what he did is he tried to Christianize this thing called the liberal arts tradition. So he becomes the main conduit or link, him and Boethius and a few others, between the classical world and the medieval world. And from there we get, the universities, Paris, Bologna, Oxford, all around 1200. And then up through that, you get the Jesuit academies and our own parochial schools into the 19th century in the US and Canada. So my way into education, first of all, was through an attempt to understand how is it that the soul is perfected and unified with God. In terms of family, well, when we had maybe the first answer I gave is kind of abstract. My wife, I fell in love with my wife. She's beautiful. She's interesting. And what am I going to do? Well, I should marry her. Well, once you marry, then all of a sudden you think about kids. Now, women are usually ahead of us a few steps. They think about that, and therefore they want to marry, at least often. So pedagogically, I knew we were going to have children. We were hoping for it. And that duty weighed on me. I wanted to know what's the best way to educate them. And so both family and education became topics that I've spent some time on, certainly. And probably even more than that would be the concept of culture, and particularly Catholic culture.
That's great. This is a follow-up question. I didn't send this one ahead of time, but when I think about Catholic education, It's one of these places that's a little bit like the Roman roads in terms of the gospel early on, utilizing that which was created in the city of man for the proclamation and the spreading of the gospel. We have these institutes of Catholic education throughout the West.
Mm-hmm.
I think a discerning eye would recognize there are certainly some gaps between what they can be and maybe what they are. Even those that are leading these institutions might, recognize that. I'm not accusing anyone, but just observing. What is the secret? How do we get back on track? How do we leverage this incredible opportunity that we have in our Catholic educational institutions? You got any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. Boy, whew. Okay,
I'm sure you do. How much time do you have?
Sure. I think the first thing to think about, so anyone who's in the game of Catholic education, I think first thing, you have to clear the ground. Our obligations as mom and dad, as aunts, uncles, let's start with mom and dad, is never to a system. Now, that doesn't mean we don't need loyalty. That doesn't mean we don't defend institutions. I'm not saying any of that. But your first duty under God is to form your kids and form them well. And we have to take that very seriously and with great joy. So if you're in a situation where you've got pride flags riding up and down the poles all the time, or you've got kids consistently being weeded out of the faith, the statistics right now are horrible. Actually, Bibby, Reginald Bibby, is one of the few sociologists in Canada who has taken a great interest in religion, and he's a Catholic of a sort, or he's a Catholic, but of a much more left leaning in his own views. So I gather. Nonetheless, he did a study. This is about 10 years ago now, and what he found, it's kind of shocking. What he found is that when you compare kids in the public system versus in the Catholic system in Canada, what you find is that on the positive side, and we do need to focus on those things that are positive, absolutely, kids are more likely to be pro-life as an aggregate if they're in the Catholic system versus the public. However, they are more likely to smoke marijuana, and they're also more likely to fornicate if they're in the Catholic system. Now, this does not seem, that's something to look at. It's something to look at. There are real problems. And so first grounding point, don't worry about systems about this. Maybe bishops have to worry about that, or school principals. That's fine. But, as mom and dad, your first duty is not to something abstract. It's to think, what's the best formation we can give to these kids? And it's not necessarily homeschooling, but it might be. It's not necessarily this or that or anything else. It's just, that's your duty. Okay. And then the second point would be, all of us who are in the Catholic education game, we need to arm ourselves with some historical knowledge, just even a little bit. And here's the bit of historical knowledge. For 25 centuries, so since the time of more or less Plato and Aristotle, the West has had a virtually continuous tradition of classical education. There has not been a radical break. Has there been development? Yes, of course. Has it modified itself through different institutional expressions? Absolutely. But the animating principles have been consistent. They've been consistent up until about 1960. And that's when progressive education took the lead and captured almost all of our institutions. If we don't recognize that there has been this culture war at the level of education, we're really walking into a battlefield with broomsticks when the other side has tanks. And it's one of the reasons why we're bleeding.
And just for listeners, when you say classical education, just give us the short explanation.
Absolutely. Well, the historical one is first. Whatever it is, it's what everyone else was about for 25 centuries. Okay, so there's a historical definition. In terms of its principles, classical education takes the view that the human being is created to be perfected. So whatever else education is about, it's first of all for the perfection of that individual, along with that our society. But first of all, it's the perfection of the human being as made in the image of God. Progressive education, just to stay with that, if you agree with that premise, all kinds of things follow, like, well, we need to pursue the good, we need to pursue the true, and we need to pursue the beautiful. Okay? Progressive education takes the precisely opposing view. It takes the view that man is, first of all, there is no truth. Truth is relative. It's a cultural construct. One, Dewey's very clear. Dewey is the grandfather of this movement, right? And then it gets worse after him. As a side note, he was one of the signatories. He's an atheist, and one of the signatories to the Humanist Manifesto, 1933. Now, he's very clever and interesting, but rotten to the core.
Yeah.
Sad to say, even though he does have good insights along the way, anecdotally. So classical education focuses on perfecting the human as human, and it looks towards those three transcendentals, good, true, and beautiful. Progressive education aims much lower and says that, no, the child is the object finally of the state, and we need to fit them so that they are suited for politics and for the economy. Now, once you start those two different premises, you work that out a little bit, and you're going to have the difference between the quest for truth and the replication of social justice warriors, which is what we're getting now.
Yeah, exactly. You're familiar with Brett Sulkad, I imagine?
I am, yes. Brett.
Yeah, he I forget the name of his book. He came on the podcast and talked about it. Obviously, a lot of the same themes that you're presenting just now were similar to that. And, what's interesting, when we talk, I would imagine progressive education system or the progressive approach would be rooted in the Enlightenment. Is that a correct way of understanding it?
The Enlightenment and the end of it, yes. It turns towards postmodernity.
Yeah, because one of the chief principles of the Enlightenment time is to do away with the doctrine of the fall, essentially. And when you do that, that has implications for this idea of perfection. What do you mean? Perfection is progressing. It's not overcoming something that's archaic and all the rest of it. So, and in that way, like, what a beautiful way then to understand what should be a wonderful collaboration between parents and any system that they choose to help, in partnership with the education of their children, because you have the same mindset, right?
Yep.
So, Dr. Topping, I want to just shift. I want to talk a little bit about family before we get into some other things. But you have said what Pope Leo XIII did for workers in the 19th century, St. John Paul II did for the family in the 20th and 21st centuries. What do you mean by that?
We had World War I, we had World War II. World War III was at the level of culture, and it was working out the after effects of the French Revolution as mediated through the Communist Revolution. And the Communist Revolution said that the number one enemy of progress, of equality, of social justice is that which is the family. Why is the family the object of relentless attack through the 20th century? Why? Because it provides an opposing community and source of authority to the state. And because man and woman are in marriage, in certain respects equal, in others totally unequal, women have babies. When they have babies, they can't be in the factory for 12 months. Marx hates the family. He wants to destroy it. And our social policies today, many of which, not all, many of which, like universal access to daycare for $10, are directly out of the Red Book. We've been hoodwinked. My wife and I lived in Eastern Europe for a time, separately, but we both did. I was there just shortly after the fall, which was in '89. I was there as a student with a number of others in Eastern Europe. Anyways, the thing that struck me, even at the sweet age of whatever I was, 19 or so, was that the communists imposed all these policies with a gun to the people's head. Here in the West, we've taken them on freely, without coercion, seemingly. And what happened is at the level of culture, we had this World War III, really, and so we've given free parking in our minds to very, very pernicious ideas that want the takedown of Western civilization, want the takedown of the church, want the takedown of classical modes of educating. And the real tragedy is we've lost our because we've lost largely our institutions of higher learning. We lost them in the 80s. We used to have 58 in English-speaking Canada, for example, and we lost 40 of them within about 12 years. We've just been decimated. We really are walking into this cultural battle with broomsticks, and they've got the tanks. So John Paul II, he saw that, he knew that, he lived through it. He recognized that no, the family has to be buttressed as the chief counterpoint against the state. Otherwise, we're back to a totalitarian situation.
Mm. There's a movement right now that we're starting to see where, and nobody's been able to quantify this, at least not as far as I've seen. And Bishop Barron started speaking about this even 2 or 3 years ago, where, the rise of the nuns among the younger generation was kind of, constantly on the increase. And then it plateaued. And then last year, I believe, was the first time where the number actually went down. And we're starting to see more young people, we've seen this in the Archdiocese of Vancouver, who are embracing Orthodox Christianity, but I would say even more so Orthodox Catholicism. There's a moving toward things like traditional Latin Mass, but all things tradition, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would think there's even a movement, and again, we haven't seen this, but I would pose it as true, or at least a hypothesis, that even the tradition of the nuclear family itself, a mom, a dad, and kids, usually several kids,
yeah,
is something that it could be an evangelical impulse. It could be that the missionary dimension of the family is extremely important today. I've even seen this in my own life, where young people commenting on good family life as revolutionary. And I so badly want to have that for me. Whereas, years ago it would have been, I want a Tesla. I want this, that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that as happening? I want it to happen. I think it's true. But this idea that all forms of traditional things that we hold as traditional could become, a real vehicle for evangelization.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't know that last year, apparently, must be an American stat.
Yeah, I think it is.
The nuns have plateaued. We're probably 5 years behind that trend, but not too far. The same things are happening. More baptisms in France. More anyone who's in the youth ministry world, essentially, that you talk to will tell you, if they're in the not a mainline Christian ministry world, but in a more evangelically oriented Catholic or Protestant world, they'll tell you the same thing that you just said. Yeah, there's a new openness. There's a new hunger, desperation. What's happened is we've now moved about 2 generations beyond. The baby boomers are now receding in our cultural memory somewhat. I mean, they still control institutions, and there are many great baby boomers, God bless them all, but their philosophical orientation and their cultural experience, frankly, is so radically unlike what a 20-year-old kid has experienced. Put yourself in the situation of a baby boomer, someone, let's say, who's 70 years old now. Well, they grew up in a more or less coherent society. That is not the experience of a 20-year-old who's been on their iPod since they were 4.
Yeah.
What's happening is that more and more young people have walked to the edge. They've been pushed to the edge by their circumstance. Families are blown up. Fewer than 1 out of 2 high school kids live with mom and dad. They've looked at the abyss and they don't like it, and they pulled back. And then where do you go? Well, one of the options out there is the Roman Catholic Church and Eastern Orthodoxy and all things that look conservative and traditional and that are based. So yeah, that's there. I mean, think of Jordan Peterson. 25 years ago, Jordan Peterson would just be a footnote. He would be a clever academic. Who knew that saying men are men and women are women should be controversial could get you into jail? Who knew that maybe there's a God? Who knew that maybe there's truth? I mean, these were not revolutionary ideas. This is sort of bringing us up to where the Greeks were in the 5th century BC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yet it does take courage to say the sky is blue and water's wet. So here we are.
Well said, Dr. Topping. It's funny that the particularly evangelical Christian churches I saw, there was this movement years ago where they kind of under the banner of seeker services and seeker church. And there was such an emphasis to become relevant to the culture, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like, no, let's just be real. Let's be real, which means rooted in that which is true, good, and beautiful, and speak about virtues, prudence, justice, temperance, fortitude. It seems counterculture, but I think it just taps into that longing in the human heart that we know is there for something transcendent, something that is bigger than myself, right? There's incredible opportunities for the church right now to speak into these things.
Absolutely. Incredible opportunities. I mean, the first call is to fidelity. That's for all of us. We're all working out our salvation. You know, we don't have, no one person has all the answers about everything. No one person has complete goodness. Cardinal Newman, whose feast day was yesterday, has this beautiful sermon in the office where he talks about the tremulous heart. The heart of the saint doesn't. What does it mean to be a saint while in via, while still working out your salvation? Well, we all live under the judgment of God, and you might say, to say it more positively, we're all living the great adventure, and it is a great adventure, and it's an agon, as St. Paul says. The Christian life is a battle, it's a struggle. So, you know, we live in the fog of war, so to speak. So none of us has the luxury to stand outside space and time and pretend to be the master of culture or you know, direct where things are going. No, our fundamental call is fidelity first, to give glory to God through our life, love God, love our neighbor, and then look what He will do with us. Look what God's grace is going to do, and that's the call that is now. That's the call that is in every century, whether it's a century for martyrdom or whether it's a century for building great and glorious and beautiful and fantastic churches and building up cathedrals and monasteries and writing polyphony and chant, and you know, whatever our station is going to be, if we're going to be in a prison cell or anywhere else, the first call is to fidelity.
Amen. Love it. Okay, we can dwell here for a long time, but we're going to move on, Dr. Topping. I want to talk about the study that you did in regards to seminarians and young priests. And I'm happy to be talking about it because it's specifically Canadian. You know, a lot of times we in the church, we borrow stats and studies from our American brothers and sisters, but this is something specific to Canada. I think you released it in 2023.
Yes.
Little side note of some pride for me. My daughter-in-law actually did your cover. I think she did the graphic design, right?
Well, not just the cover, the whole thing.
The whole kit and caboodle. There you go.
Beautiful.
So, Dr. Topping, for those who aren't familiar, maybe you can just share with us some of the key findings from that study.
Yes, happy to. Thank you. Yes, it's called Meet Our New Priests. I think you can still find it online. A couple of dioceses put it up that way. So, yes, this was done through through Newman Theological College. So credit should go to them for funding it. And what it was is basically we wanted to get a first baseline of research about seminaries and priestly life in Canada. So that was it. And we wanted to know, how many seminarians are there? What do they like? What are the books that are exciting them? How many priests do we have? Why did they become priests? A couple of key findings that touched me, and I think have touched some other people, are, first of all, how small the cohorts are. When we were constructing the study, we partnered with CARA, which is the main research body. I mean, it's really the premier body in the world, out of Georgetown in DC. So we were constructing this thing with them. And when we were running our initial estimates based on US data and our demographic data in Canada, we way overestimated how many seminarians we have and how many priests were coming out. So I guess a first shocking number is really to think, okay, how many guys are coming out? In the year that we did it, there were, 13 priests. I have to take a look here, in all of Canada. Now there was COVID in there, so that changed the bubble. Here are a few facts. 200 seminarians in the country, more or less. That was a couple of years ago, so now there could be a few more, a few less. The average amount of time it takes to get a seminarian out is 8 years. Now the bishops have just elongated that in their wisdom. Myself, I doubt that wisdom. I think it weeds out guys who are choleric, frankly, guys who want leadership roles, who are ready to go sooner. They have reasons for that, but there should be. My own hope is that this kind of research would help initiate some conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, two other facts. So one, the Vatican has come up with this ratio. So imagine you have 100 priests in a diocese in 2025, and you want 100 priests in 2035 or 2055, whatever. So that's kind of a dull number, because usually you have in North America, you've got an increase in the population. Canada had its largest increase, by the way, since 1957 last year. So we have a massive demographic increase. It's not through births, it's through immigration, but there is an increase. Okay, the Vatican says, it gives you this fancy number. They say, well, if you want to keep stasis, you have to have this many men in the hopper. Now, if you use their number, what Canada would need just to keep the present number of priests today would be 753 seminarians in the hopper, and we have 200. Right? So we would need a 3.5 time increase if we were just to stay where we are. Now, that doesn't take into account the fact that many of our priests are elderly. What practically it means is that we're in serious trouble as a church in Canada. Deep, deep trouble when it comes to the presbyterial office. Something hopeful, I don't want to just say bad things, something to look for would be, we asked these guys, and we more importantly correlated with this with a large body of US data. We were asking, what is the ministry that you were involved with prior to coming to seminary? So we're trying to see, correlations. What are the kinds of activities that might help launch a young man? And two things I'd say here that we found. The first is that absolutely altar serving was the number one activity or ministry that these guys were involved with. To me, this is, as I said at the beginning, I've got 9 sons. One of them is a seminarian. A couple of them want to be priests. We've all been heavily involved in being altar boys for years in different places. Get the girls off the altar.
Mm-hmm.
I can't understand. I mean, I understand the argument, but if you want to attract young men in the trajectory of their formation, they are not looking to compete with young girls when they're 15 years old. This is not actually controversial. It's just kind of the way that young boys work vis-a-vis young girls. That's one thing. Altar serving is very important. And the second would be that the witness of their parish priest was extremely important. Mom and dad have a huge role to play. It's massive. But by the time these guys are about to launch into seminary, mom and dad need other people, other institutions, other places. And the most important there was to have the parish priest give them a good example. I was with Cardinal Collins this past weekend. He was one of our keynotes at our opening conference, a Renewing Culture conference here in Edmonton. And Cardinal Collins said, and I think this is spot on, he said, the best way to attract men to the priesthood is to have happy, holy priests. I think this study bears that out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I think you spoke about just from the testimony of seminarians was also movements and associations like CCO having a positive impact and creating an openness and desire.
Huge impact.
Right. When I read it, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Jim Collins. He's kind of a leadership author.
Yes,
Good to Great. And one of the things that he speaks about frequently is this idea that vision is like a two-sided coin. Okay. On the one hand, you have a picture of the preferred future, which is what most of us think is synonymous with vision. It's like I see something out on the horizon that fills me with hope, and it's clear, and that's great and that's important. But he says, unlike most people in the leadership space, but he talks about how important it is to first have a brutally honest and accurate assessment of current reality.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that as your starting point, your vision is going to get you lost because you're not honest with where you're at. So when you say things like, it's kind of depressing, you've only got 200 seminarians, we need 753 just to maintain the status quo. It's like we can't ignore this data. This is really important to understand. So I do hope, Dr. Topping, I hope that this gets in the hands. I know our vocation director was fond of the writing and all that here in Vancouver, but I hope it spurs a lot of conversations with people that have to have them. So let me put this question to you, Dr. Topping. Let's say there's a number of bishops that are listening to this podcast right now, what would be the question that you bring to a table of those who are in the work of vocations and concerned about it and all that? What are the questions that you would pose to the men, to our leaders, our pastoral leaders, to get us discussing what we need to about a culture of vocation and the crisis we're in, and maybe some other things that you deem as important?
Well, I have had quite a few opportunities to do that sort of thing. Let me say, Archbishop Richard Smith was the ordinary here at the time, and he wrote the foreword to it, and was very generous, as was Bishop McGrattan, in inviting myself and another priest, Father Cristino, to speak to the CCCB, and to really have an open door. So there's a lot of goodwill, and please don't hear anything of what I'm saying as opposing that.
Yep.
I think, if I were in the role of a bishop, what I would want to know is, I would want to, you mentioned these 2 points, or these 2 levels of vision. That's very nice from Jim Collins. I would want to know, I would want to put some money towards the first point. What is the fact? What are the facts on the ground? What is a baseline of research that we could get done so we can soberly look at what we're doing? Bishops have a very difficult job, as does anyone who is in a high position of leadership. You think of those, what is it called? The Eisenhower quadrants?
The matrix, yeah.
The matrix, yeah. Well, boy, there are churches burning. And so there's always something in front of us that's urgent and that's necessary. But it seems to me, if I were here, here's another terrible stat. For every bishop, this is including the retired ones, we have about 3 seminarians in the country for every bishop. Ooh. Look, the Catholic Church is hierarchically ordered. That means there are very few at the top and there's many at the bottom. For every bishop, we only have 3 guys coming up. Really, within a decade or 2 decades, the numbers of closures are going to be enormous. It's going to hit us like a tsunami, because the demographic wave, where the baby boomer demographic of priests, when they're retiring out, which is right now and only accelerating over the next 5 years. Once that happens, the urgent is all of a sudden, the urgent that we perhaps ignored is going to be on our necks. So I would, that'd be a challenge that I would put out there, that if we don't look at this now with hard tactical strategic thinking, and put money behind just basic research, basic program formation, it will be in front of us, and it will be here fast.
For sure. And I certainly hear in your voice the empathy for our pastoral leaders, bishops in particular, because, well, perhaps I can say it like this. A good friend of mine says that if anyone desires to be a bishop, he deserves to be a bishop. Right?
Absolutely.
Like it's a challenge, but
a great challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. But the question that I was posing to you is how important it is for us to lead with questions, because I think, we come from a teaching church. We have such a volume of teaching at our ready.
Yeah.
But pastorally and strategically, I think we need to start, asking a lot of questions. So I really appreciate your empathy towards our pastoral leaders.
I hope that comes through. That is my mind. And, I'm not a bishop. That's not my world, but we should be all praying absolutely for them, even when we disagree with them on, any one point of procedure, prudence, or whatever. Always charity and goodwill. And, but this is a matter that we can't be, it's of a common concern. I've got Newman at my side here, just finishing development of doctrine. And, we are all in it together. We have to serve each other, but that can't mean that debate should be silenced, or that there should be this wall of secrecy behind the question of what are we going to do to get more priests. No, this is a big problem, and it concerns all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So we want to turn our attention now to this wonderful new institute that you are founding, Gregory the Great Institute. So why don't you just share with listeners, what is your vision? What are you hoping to see in terms of the fruit of this new institute?
Let me start with the story. So last year, I was invited to a beautiful event at Catholic college in the United States. And I used to work in the U.S. We lived there for a number of our children are U.S. citizens. So spent a lot of time in the U.S. Last year, I was at this gorgeous event And, you know, my heart was breaking. And my heart was breaking because I thought again, why is it that we always have to go to the US to find these enthusiastic, unabashedly orthodox, evangelically oriented events, conferences, institutions? Why is it that we're forced to do that repeatedly? Why can't we have some of that dynamic energy here at home? And at root, it's this love of, for me, the reason why we wanted to start this institute is because we want the church to flourish. We want Christian life to be beautiful, bold, evangelical here at home. And there are good things happening here at home, but boy, is there a need. There's a need everywhere. So we thought, hey, can we start a vehicle? Can we get an institutional structure that can be a means for helping to embolden, to give new courage to those who are interested in unashamedly being in love with the church's tradition in all her fullness. That's why we started it.
That's awesome. I love the fact that you speak about it at home and in Canada. I forget who I was with. Might have been Jeff Lockhart, who you're good friends with. But we were talking about how important it is to have kind of a very specific Canadian Catholic imaginative vision, right? And it seems to me, Dr. Topping, so fitting because there was a time in our church's history here in Canada where we were the missionary presence throughout the world.
That's right.
And why not see that again?
I think we should.
Let's do it.
I'm with you. And there are beautiful things going on. You're right. Up until the 1970s, now this is a whole long, this is kind of a fun discussion, and maybe another time we can talk about it. But literally up until the 1970s, Canadians, middle class, high class, low class, conceived themselves as more conservative, more traditional than our neighbors to the south. Our cities were safer. Our churches were more full. We had more of a, you might say, integrated, even communitarian self-understanding of ourselves. We weren't just cowboys in a wild west. We settled the West through law and order. And this set us on a trajectory in our country's history that frankly has been, by our elites, abandoned and bashed. But there's still plenty of remnants of this more conservative history and past. And I don't mean conservative in some, I don't know, esoteric sense, but just a love of home, a love of place, a love of the good, a love of that which is beautiful, and making a home in that where you're from. Edmund Burke has this beautiful idea. He's the father of conservative philosophy. He's writing at the time of the French Revolution. He says that, society is made up of little platoons of friends and families. That's the network, or that's the basic principle from which all of society develops. And we've gone too far into giving ourselves over into transnational, transhumanist, trans everything vision of the common good. No. Our loves have to start with local places. It starts with your family. It starts with your parish, your friends, your country, your province. You build out from there. That's what we're trying to do here.
Absolutely. Now, you've got some particular areas of focus that will help formulate strategy and how you're moving forward. Maybe you can share a few words about that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, two things I'll say. Our mission is, so if you want to see what we're about, we've got a fancy website, gregorythegreat.ca. So anyone who's interested, I encourage you to please look there. Sign up for our newsletter. That's the best way to keep in touch. We send something out about once a month. We won't spam you. And the mission statement is this. It's equipping Christians to renew culture in the light of faith and reason. Equipping Christians to renew culture in the light of faith and reason. We've got all kinds of projects that we've already started and some really big ones we're looking to announce shortly. But I'll just say about our development, where we're at is we've got a 3-stage development. Phase 1 was to get things going. We've done that. Phase 2, which is where we're at now, is called the proof of concepts phase. So what we're trying to do is fail fast and fail forward. We've got various programs that we are launching, testing to see what is going to stick, what's going to be most effective, most helpful for our bishops, for our communities here. And then in July 2027, we've set ourselves for a date. That date, we say we're going to launch something big then, or we are going to if we're going to keep going, we're going to launch something big then. And we do have some big ideas. I don't want to necessarily talk about them now, but we've got this 2 years of testing where we're looking for partners, alliances, where we're seeing where we can be most helpful.
That's great. I mean, you dropped a website. It's really good, actually. You've done well so far. It's amazing to get something up like that quick. So gregorythegreat.ca, gregorythegreat.ca. Dr. Topping, maybe we should leave it there. We'll pause for now. I do look forward to maybe another conversation in the near future. I would love to unpack some other things and perhaps to hear more concretely about some of the exciting things that you've got going once they, come to a fuller vision. So we'd love to have you back on.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for having me, Brett. God bless you in your good works there in the Archdiocese of Vancouver and through this podcast.
I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate all that you've done and continue to do. Thank you for your yes. Yeah, really amazing. And listeners, I trust this has been a blessing to you, and I look forward to next episode. Till then, be blessed.